You're listening to episode 109, Dimitra's story, a son with transposition of the great arteries and coarctation of the aorta. Hello, my friends. We have another heart mama, and I wanted to fit them all into February, but I couldn't. So we are just creeping into March here with this amazing mom, Dimitra, and her story, which coincidentally, her son also has transposition of the great arteries, just like last week's episode. So it's really interesting to see how parallel and different their stories are and how different hospitals work and different policies and visitation and COVID and non-COVID and all of those factors that go into a family story that are just so important to recognize and note, and just had such a beautiful conversation with Dimitra. And so I want to get to it right away. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners. So why don't we just start off talking a little bit about you and your family, where you guys come from, and a little bit about your life every day.
Sure. So I live in Los Angeles with my husband, Jordan, and my son, Leighton, who's 2.5. I'm currently 8.5 months pregnant, expecting another baby boy.
Oh.
So we're very excited. It's a wild time in our life, but we're kind of just embracing the chaos.
Yes.
As much as we can. It's been a very different experience this time, going through a quote unquote healthy pregnancy. And in a lot of ways, it's almost let me kind of heal or process a little bit about some of the things that I may have blocked out or not really given too much attention to with my pregnancy with Leighton. But, that's us on the day-to-day. My husband and I both work from home currently. I know that's a very common position to be in nowadays with the current pandemic situation, but that was not planned. That's just a situation that we fell into. But it's been amazing to have that extra time at home, and we've kind of fallen into a rhythm. It only took 2 years
exactly
to feel like we had a handle on things. But it's funny, right? When we kind of feel like, okay, we can get this now. We're in our groove. We're going to bring a new baby into the mix and, mix it all up again. But, we're a very outdoorsy family. We're Californians through and through. We're both born and raised here. So we love being out and about. We live not far from the beach. That's kind of a bit about our life.
I love that. I haven't asked this question before on the podcast, but I want to ask you when we're done. And I just chatting with you now, it feels like you have so much out of your control, and you have this rhythm and you found this routine. And were you like that before you got pregnant with Leighton? Has that always kind of been your personality, or do you surprise yourself with who you've become now?
It's interesting. I think that's definitely always been a part of who I am. I grew up, my parents divorced when I was 2, and I bounced between 2 households my entire life. And I felt like I was very malleable. I adapted to change and new situations. I don't know, nature versus nurture. Some of it might just be kind of who I am, trying to take things in stride. And then part of it was just kind of having to adapt to bouncing between 2 complete households week after week. So it's interesting because I would have said, yes, absolutely. That's just part of who I am. But with my experience becoming a heart mom and through CHD and after Leighton's diagnosis, it made me realize that I'm maybe not as resilient as I thought, because that feeling of constantly being out of control especially when the stakes were so high, felt life or death so many times with Leighton. That was one of the biggest struggles for me.
Right.
Yeah,
that's such a good answer. Its perspective is, kind of everything as we're looking back and thinking what played a part and who am I now and how do I handle this? So would you mind kind of taking us back to the beginning with Leighton and when you found out that something was going on with his heart?
Sure. So up until my anatomy scan at 20 weeks, it was a pretty textbook, straightforward, healthy pregnancy. We did have a bit of trouble conceiving. And so I took Clomid. I took a medication to induce ovulation to get pregnant, but so it was a bit bumpy. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
So weird starting off as part of the situation and what do I include and what don't I? I tend to really launch on tangents.
That's okay. You know what? This is the parents who are going to listen to this also are tangent people. And so whatever you want to say is great.
Okay. So apart from having a few troubles conceiving him, once I was pregnant, it was pretty easy and straightforward. I was a little bit sick in the beginning, but nothing out of the ordinary. And so by the time the 20-week anatomy scan, I was just so excited to hopefully get a glimpse at his face and to hear all his little measurements and all the things that we typically think to look forward to in the anatomy scan.
Well, it's so true. It's like everybody works you up to this is when you get to see everything and it's the long one. And so you have this anticipation of this beautiful experience.
Absolutely. And that wasn't our experience even from the beginning. We went into our regular OB who had the ultrasound in office, and Leighton was in this funny position where we couldn't see a thing. We couldn't see his face. All we saw was his spine. And so the ultrasound tech sat there with us for a few minutes, and we tried all the things: drink juice, jump around, ice cold water. He would not move, which is very funny and very indicative of his personality now. But so they eventually sent me home and made an appointment with a perinatologist. So it was a brand new doctor I'd never seen before. And he said, you know what, this will be better. They have even better equipment. You'll get to see higher quality images and they can take more time. We just were in the OB office. They're just cranking through these appointments. Usually they take 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, great. That's awesome. So we went in and it was they squeezed us in last minute. So it was 8:00 at night by the time we got in there. The whole building was shut down. The janitor was vacuuming in the hallway. It was a very surreal experience walking in there. And we met this doctor who we'd never met before, and he seemed nice enough. We got to chatting, and he scanned for a very, very, very long time. And at one point when we were chatting, being the nervous new parents that we were, we asked, if you had seen something, would you tell us right away? Or how does that work? Would our doctor call us? Just kind of asking preemptively, having no idea that anything could potentially be wrong. And he said, well, it depends how bad it is. And I would either tell you on the spot or, we would discuss it afterwards. So we were like, okay. And then pretty shortly after that, he stepped out of the room to take a page. But I think Jordan and I both picked up on the shift in his demeanor and were a little bit concerned. And when he came back, he was very quiet and took a few more images and said, okay, I did find something. Why don't you collect your things and come into my office and we can discuss it? And having absolutely no concept of what it could potentially be. I mean, our minds were just swirling. I think we were in shock from that moment on. And then when we went into his office, I'll never forget, he had a textbook out in front of him, like a high school biology looking book. And it was open to the page, Transposition of the Great Arteries. And he started kind of talking through it. Honestly, a lot of it is a blur. But I just remember he seemed really uncertain and it made it feel to me like this was something extremely rare that he had never really heard of before. And as he was referencing the book, as he was telling us this, And I had never heard of it before in my entire life. Honestly, I don't think I had even heard of congenital heart disease or heart defects at that point. I knew it was possible, and I knew about birth defects, but it was so far out of my realm of what I knew day to day, or anybody that I had known who'd been pregnant had gone through. So I remember we asked him if it was life-threatening, like trying to get a sense of what exactly we were dealing with. And he told us that it certainly could be, and that he would need surgery almost immediately after birth, open heart surgery. And we're just trying to like process all this information. And there were a few moments in there, I think, that made us ultimately not feel super comfortable in his care. And so we ended up switching later down the line, which was a very, very wise decision on our part. I feel like we learned pretty early on through that experience that how important it is to build a care team that you trust and that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
He made a few comments about terminating the pregnancy, which I know is a very common thing to discuss anytime a diagnosis, certainly a serious one, is brought up. But the way that it was broached to us felt like a recommendation, not this is just something I have to let you know your options. He even went so far as to say, oh, you're a little bit later. You don't have very much time to decide. But I know a guy in the Valley who could do one for you or later if that ends up being the decision.
Wow.
And so we were just kind of like, what? Very difficult thing to wrap your mind around at any point. But when brought up in such a casual way, we were just very, very thrown off trying to process all this information. And honestly, when we left there was a big part of me that just hoped he was wrong. I hoped he had no idea what he was talking about. And I, started dreaming about, okay, this was just a big mistake and we'll see somebody else. The one good thing he did, well, first of all, we're forever grateful that he found it. So that's the best thing that he did, because it did end up being true. And that was one of the major diagnoses that Leighton had. But he also called my doctor, and I was able to talk to him, even though it was like 11:30 at night at this point. And he was able to provide some reassurance and said, we're going to get a great team together. I'll get you in with a cardiologist, pediatric cardiologist, first thing tomorrow morning if we can. Let's just get this confirmed via echocardiogram. And that brought me a little sliver of comfort, because I was leaving there thinking that I may not get to raise this baby or get to have this baby. It was a very hard time. But then we did see and meet the pediatric cardiologist who we still see today, and who honestly feels like a member of our family now. He has been such a saving grace through this whole experience, and the polar opposite experience to our encounter with the previous doctor. We felt instantly comforted by him and have all the faith and trust in him in the world pretty much immediately off the bat, even though he basically told us the same exact information, which is that your son has a very serious heart condition and will need open heart surgery immediately after birth.
But you're right. It's like the trust and the faith in this person to walk alongside you through the hardest part. Like whenever, there's skilled doctors and physicians, and then when they have the bedside manner and like the human component, I'm like, you are pure gold. You are doing what you were meant to do. And it's pretty amazing to be able to have somebody like that on your team.
Oh, absolutely.
So talk us through when you found out the diagnosis, you got comfortable with the doctor. What was the rest of your pregnancy like? I had just mentioned to you that I just chatted with another mom whose son had TGA, and she said, when he was safe in my belly, it's like I could breathe, right? Because I knew that everything was okay as long as he was inside. It wasn't until he got outside that, all those fears and anxieties start to come to the top. Was it the same way for you, or was it a little bit different?
Absolutely, it was, but it did take me a little bit to get there. I still had a roller coaster of emotions while I was kind of coming to terms with the news, because it's just was so not our picture.
Yeah.
Obviously everyone, feels so entitled to, I'm going to get pregnant and have a healthy baby. And, you take so much of that for granted that you don't really realize how much of it is out of your control until it's sort of the rug is swept out from underneath your feet. So I definitely had some periods where I was very sad, crying a lot, couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days, and still kind of felt like we were losing him. It felt like I had nothing to cling on to, and at any point it could all be taken away. And it took me a little bit to get to that place. I would say a couple of weeks. But once I was there, and I felt like the more we researched it and I was comfortable, like, learning that information, because it was hard to read at first. Everything felt like another blow. Oh, and this quote unquote smaller things, like, oh, he'll be intubated right away, or these other procedures or things. Just, it was a lot to take in at first. But once I, like I said, came to terms with it, I did feel that way, very much so. And I took it upon myself to give him the most calm, comforting home possible. And I did have a lot of pride in the fact that he was safe in my belly during that time. And I was doing prenatal yoga and trying to relax. And I was realizing that my emotions were potentially funneling straight to him at that point. And it was very motivating for me to kind of pull me out of that period of anger and sadness. And, but definitely the last part of my pregnancy, I did feel that. And then it started to be where I was excited for him to come, but I was also really nervous because he was going to leave this safe little bubble that we've created together in my belly.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, because I'm sure that was her experience too, that, there's just this initial blow of like the grief cycle that you go through, and that it is very real and can keep you in bed and can keep you crying a lot. And that is a very normal reaction to this kind of news. And having people around you, it's just so important to be able to help take care of you as the mom who has just been told all this news.
Oh, absolutely. And I leaned on my family and friends. It took us a little bit to share. We sort of opened up slowly. Obviously, initially told our immediate family, and then a few weeks went by and we told family and friends and extended family. And then I eventually did share when I was pregnant on social media with my larger network. And I was a little hesitant. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it or how much I wanted to share. But I did get to a point where, because I felt so alone initially, because I had 3 girlfriends who were pregnant at the same time, and our experiences, we just couldn't relate on so many things we could, and they were amazing about it. But it did make me feel like I was just off in this corner, and I was the only person this was happening to. Even though I knew that wasn't true, it can be very isolating. And I was hesitant to share, but in my case, I think it was the right thing. And it ended up being a wonderful outlet and something I've continued on for years since then. And the amount of support we received, and everyone was so fantastic. And it just meant so much to us to have that to lean on.
Absolutely. Well, tell us about when he was born and what that was like for you. Did they do a C-section that you prepared for?
So in true Leighton fashion, we had a plan. Everything was all set. We had the induction. It was very important to me. Even before I got pregnant, was fascinated with the idea of intervention-free birth. I bought this book, and I knew I wasn't quite a fit for like a home birth or midwifery care or anything, but I was still fascinated by it. And I read all these birth stories. And so I asked my doctor at one point, what does the birth look like now? Is that going to be a scheduled C-section? Will I be able to go into labor spontaneously? And he was great and supportive of giving me any options that I could, any choice I could have in the matter. And, but ultimately we did decide to go with an induction. But a C-section wasn't necessary. He was, he wasn't breech. Everything looked okay. His growth was on track. So we decided we would do an induction so we could still time it and make sure everyone was available and on call who needed to be present for his birth. But of course, a week before that scheduled induction, I went into labor on my own, and he came very quickly. But through that, I was able to have a lot of the things that I had hoped for in my labor and delivery experience, like going through it on my own. I labored at home for a little bit and then went to the hospital, and it happened to work out that all the doctors that we had hoped would be there were there at that time.
Leighton knew. So, he was like, guess what, Mom, the team is there, so you just relax and have me.
Exactly. It felt like just the sweetest gift from him to me. It's going to be a bumpy road shortly after this.
I'll give you this one.
Yes, exactly. And so, I was able to have the mostly intervention-free birth, and he came very quickly and cried right away. That was something that that moment I was so nervous about, was getting through that. And if we were going to have any sense of relief if he's okay right away. And he let out this big, huge cry, and they put him on my chest for just a second. I was able to just see him and feel him on me for a minute. And then, of course, they swooped him away, which we knew, which was the plan. But I was still riding this high from this birth, like, he's here, okay? Like, this big hurdle is over, and he's crying. That's a good sign. And my husband went with him, which was also the part of the plan. So he got to follow him over to the NICU while they assessed him and got him set up. He did need a good amount of support right away. He was not as stable as we had hoped. With TGA, you hear a lot of different, not promises, but ideal scenarios. And I would say in a lot of cases, Leighton never really fit that. And part of that was because he did have another undiagnosed CHD that we didn't find out about, in addition to TGA, until he was 3 days old and transported to the Children's Hospital. So now in hindsight, we know that was probably part of why he wasn't as stable or able to nurse, or he was intubated pretty much immediately and then all the way up until surgery, which sometimes is not the case. Sometimes you get like a couple days before surgery where they're a little bit more stable and they can be in the room with you, and or at least that's what we were told. So of course that's what we were hoping for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something else that I learned too, is not to grip these expectations, because we never know. You never know what can happen. And I think that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, but the sooner that I did, the better, because there were so many things that we felt blindsided by, strictly because we had expected something different and had hoped for something different. And I wish we could have gone into it a little more open-minded to other possibilities of complications or just things that could happen, because I think it was harder for us to cope with in the moment when we would have these new surprises or setbacks, which are inevitable. And we didn't want to think about that at the time, but I wish we had a little bit. But so yeah,
what was your coping like when you would have these setbacks? Or did you have any coping, or what did that look like for you?
In the hospital, we were just kind of in survival mode. I think my husband does a much better job at staying sort of logical and thinking through things and being sort of the rock in a situation that's very heightened. So we had a couple very scary situations in the hospital where I would lose it a little bit. And he was able to kind of be the one to communicate with the doctors and step up, I guess, in that moment. And so I was so grateful we make a really good team that way. And we sort of take turns when one person needs a moment or is going to break down, the other one can step up and be a little stronger. I don't know if that's intentional or if it just happens to work out that way. But I would say he coped better than I did. I had some hard times in the hospital and wasn't probably taking care of myself in the way that I should have been. The funny thing is how quickly you go from, as the laboring mother who just gave birth, you go from the patient to the mother and the support person to the patient.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when we first got to Children's Hospital after he was transferred, I was in a ton of pain. And I asked a nurse if they had an ibuprofen for me. And she's like, I'm so sorry, but I can't give you ibuprofen because you're not the patient. I was like, oh, of course. That's why I'm so sorry. And so I had to waddle down to the, store in the Children's Hospital and get myself an ibuprofen just because I wanted to be standing at his bedside and to be there. I think, any moment I got with him felt like healing and part of coping, and any semblance of getting to feel like a quote unquote normal mom, get to do regular newborn things, and even just holding him was a big production. So I remember I would have to ask, and two nurses would come and set me up with the pillows in the right position, but I would ask over and over to get as much time with him as possible, because that was the most grounded I felt through that whole experience, was just having him in my arms. And if I could have done that 24/7, I would have. Sure, I certainly couldn't have. But
that makes so much sense, because I mean, the whole previous 9 months and building up to this, it's like, just as long as he's here in my arms, we're going to be okay. Just like you said, that grounding feeling. And there's probably nothing more powerful than just having that kind of comfort of you with him and him with you. And it's just heartbreaking to know that, it couldn't be like that all the time. And we'll be right back. In the past, I've been really reliant on coffee and energy drinks to help me focus, but I've been drinking Magic Mind. Y'all have heard me talk about it before, and it's made a huge difference in my energy level and ability to focus. The matcha, adaptogens, and nootropics help fight procrastination, brain fog, and fatigue, and I don't know any healthcare workers or parents that don't have that in their life right now. After just a few days of adding Magic Mind to my morning routine, I noticed I needed much less caffeine. Magic Mind truly values the well-being of healthcare workers and parents, and that is why they are giving us 20% off to all of our Child Life On-Call listeners. So go to magicmind.co/childlife and use code CHILDLIFE for 20% off. If you are looking for a way to make a child in your life smile, then you have to go to smilemakers.com and go through all of the must-have toys, stickers, and prizes for kids. You'll find everything you need to make the hospital, waiting room, or even your own living room more fun with games, crafts, and prizes for every occasion. I also have very good news for you, because when you go to smilemakers.com and type in OnCall20, you will get 20% off with no minimum order required. So stock up on bundles made specifically for hospital procedures and therapeutic play, and make these already very affordable items more affordable with OnCall20. That's smilemakers.com and OnCall20 for 20% off your entire order. When he went to surgery, did he do it on day 3, or what day did you guys discover this kind of new heart defect?
So day 3 was the night before surgery. They were prepping him. They took a final echo just to see, as much information as they possibly could going into surgery. And that was where they found it. And they came in and actually gave us all the consent forms, which is a painful process in and of itself. Yes. Basically signing, life away, it feels like, in that moment, and putting it in their hands. And so I crawled into Jordan's lap, and we were just sitting there. And then they came back in, and he said, I'm so sorry, but we're going to have to do this again, because I was just looking over his echo and I found something, and he's going to need an additional repair in this surgery. And we were just reeling. And I'd never heard of coarctation of the aorta. and they gave us a brief description, but honestly, I couldn't even,
Yeah.
It was all a blur. I didn't even remember the name when they were going into it.
Like on a good day when you're sitting in your congenital heart defect class and you have the best professor, it's hard to understand, right? But like in the situation that you're in, it's like, how do you even begin to listen or hear or, oh yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. And I had felt like I was trying to be such a good student, a good heart mom student. And I looked up TGA and the structures of the heart. And so I was like, I don't know this one. I don't understand, but I didn't have time to learn about it. I just said, obviously you need to do whatever you need to do and we'll figure it out after the fact. But so then we signed a new consent form for the new surgery, which I guess, it was better that we knew maybe going into it because it did add additional kind of set of complications or maybe an extra time on the surgery that would have concerned us. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But then he went into surgery the next day at 8 a.m.
Okay. And I guess this was pre-pandemic then, if he's 2.5 now.
Mm-hmm.
So was this pre-pandemic that he had his surgery? Okay. So you guys were allowed to be in the waiting room with each other and family members, or what was surgery day like?
So we were able to have family and visitors, and honestly, because it was pretty shortly after, it was August 2019 when he had his surgery. So the pandemic hit pretty shortly after. And I remember just thinking, my heart just dropped for all the parents in that scenario right now, and how different it would be, and how much we relied on having family and visitors and stuff. And that really, my heart just broke for everyone in that situation. And we did end up also having another procedure post-pandemic. So we got our fair share and our taste of what that actually was like, and how difficult that is. But it was just Jordan and I initially. We decided we didn't know how we were going to feel on that day. And when they actually took him back, he had a series of interventions leading up to surgery. Each time he has to fast. So basically he had no actual nutrition other than like saline IV until the night before surgery. So he was absolutely starving and miserable. And it was one of the hardest nights in the hospital for us because he was just up all night crying and we couldn't console him. And it was a very difficult way to go into a very trying day.
Yeah.
But very early in the morning, I finally asked the nurse, I said, can I just hold, I know it's 3 a.m., but can I just hold him? Is there anything I can do? Like, I just can't sit here with him crying. I feel so awful and so helpless. And she said, oh, sure, if you want to. And I held him until they came and got him for surgery. And he finally settled and fell asleep in my arms. And I just cried over him. I said, I'm so sorry. But that was kind of like leading up to it. I felt like at least we got that moment of calm. And before, we had to hand him over. And then Jordan and I went down to the cafeteria. We popped into the waiting room for a minute, and the mood, I think, there were so many families, and you could just see in their eyes, they were all in the same situation as us. And it was hard for us to sit in there. So we wanted to go try and get some fresh air. So we ended up going downstairs, and I assumed I would have no appetite because my stomach was in knots, but Jordan and I both scarfed down a massive breakfast in the cafeteria, which is so funny. You have these expectations of what you'll feel like or how you'll cope in the moment. And that was so far from it. But so we sat and had a meal together. And I know a lot of hospitals have different ways of updating families. We didn't have like a text system or like a screen for us to look at. We had pretty much no idea what was going on until they called us and told us that he was out of surgery. So it felt like a long 4 hours.
Yeah.
But when they finally did, we were able to go up, and the surgeon came out, and he like whipped open the door and had this great big smile on his face and said it went fantastic. He did great. You could see him soon. And so at that point, we called our families and they all came into the waiting room with us, and we were laughing and crying and texting people and hugging and had this like huge moment of celebration that I think we got caught up in. We were swept up in that we didn't really realize the hours were ticking by and we still hadn't been called back to go see him. And then eventually another doctor who I recognized from his team came in and had that look again, that look that you don't ever want to see from a care provider of your child. And she said, you know, there's been some complications. He's bleeding and we're working on him right now, but we can't locate the source of it. And I wanted to let you know we owed you guys an update at this point, that I think they're going to have to take him back to emergency surgery and open him up again to try to find it and stop it. And we were just like ripped from this dance party, basically, we had been having 2 minutes prior. And I just remember feeling, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I was sitting here cheering and he is suffering 2 doors away. And I had absolutely no idea. So they did end up taking him back to emergency surgery. They had to pull his surgeon out of another surgery, and were able to stop it and locate it. But as the days went on, we realized how severe that situation was. Nurses would pop by that we had never seen before, and I'm checking on my little rock star. How's he doing? And we realized quickly that it was like an all hands on deck situation to stop him, because they had taken him back to the room when it became emergent, and everyone was running in to help try to figure this out and get him stabilized, which was a moment that came back to me quite a bit for the years after. I think I struggled with some PTSD from some of that and a lot of different things that had happened in the hospital, but that moment in particular where we were waiting, because it was another several hours until we were able to see him and got the news that he was again stable and that they were able to stop the hemorrhage and that everything was okay. And those few hours, I think back on and I'm haunted by a bit when I think back to our experience. But that was just one of the many hurdles. It's a roller coaster in recovery post-op, especially when you're working on these tiny babies. He was 4 days old, and there's so many things that they have to relearn how to do and overcome, but they do. And he honestly, I think, recovered faster from open heart surgery than I did from labor and delivery after all of that was said and done.
You know, as you're speaking, I feel like you just do such a good job of explaining how you felt and, you know, the highs and the lows, and then getting your feet knocked underneath you. And then it's so much. So no wonder it's taking a while to recover and process from, because that's just so traumatic on so many levels. Yeah, I don't think anybody would blame you for having a hard time with that. And it's just not fair. Like, you know, it's like you got through the surgery, like that's what it should be. It's just not fair that you all had to go through so much again. I'm so sorry.
And I think that sort of, thank you. I think that helped us temper our expectations. It took about a year for us to like really understand that we were setting ourselves up for failure to continuously look to the next milestone. If we just get through surgery, it'll be okay. Once he puts on some weight, everything will be fine. After we're discharged, it'll be back to normal. Those kinds of thoughts and feelings and hopes, of course, we all are trying to cling to something during this situation, but that continuously set us up for disappointment or having that much harder time coping when things didn't go to plan. And that's just so often the case when you're dealing, especially with these tiny babies and any sort of medical diagnosis. There really are no guarantees.
Yeah, it's that whole like hoping for the best, planning for the worst mentality that, you know, is just not a fair mentality to have when it comes to your child's life. It's just not fair.
Exactly.
So You said he recovered pretty well from surgery. And so you guys got back home, and what was life like, first child post surgery, post 2 heart surgeries? What was it like adjusting to life at home for you?
Well, I feel like we know no different, right? We were first-time parents. We were total balls of nerves at all times, but we did kind of settle into life at home. And I felt the first time we came home and I walked around we were living in an apartment at the time. I walked around our apartment and I wasn't tethered to anything. I'll never forget that experience.
Yeah.
It was such a strange feeling. And we were even joking.
You're referring to like him. It's like, so are you referring to how he doesn't have wires or tubes on him? Is that what you mean by tethered, yes. Or what do you mean?
Yes. He was on oxygen until the day we left, and the heart rate monitors and was just, checked his oxygen and everything. And so we were very used to rocking him in a 2-foot radius, just a little 2-foot, a little 2x2. So going home was such a surreal experience, but it was, what we had hoped for so long. And he had a lot of follow-up appointments. So it was a lot of in and out of the hospital as well. But there was some comfort in that too. There's something you get used to constantly being able to just look up at a monitor and know if his vitals are okay. Is his oxygen okay? And it took a while for us to learn how to not rely on them and to look at him and to trust our instinct. And so there was some comfort in continuously having those checkups and just getting that extra little eye on him to know that he was okay, because it was hard to trust for a while. And he did end up at the 8-week post-op appointment, which was supposed to be the appointment where we get clearance, and he had sternal precautions. So there were a lot of guidelines we had to follow to keep his wound clean, and his sternum was recovering. So we were hoping to get clearance at that appointment, but it ended up that he needed another procedure. So we very quickly ended up back inpatient to address continued narrowing in the aorta, which has been something that we've had to do a number of times, 2 other times, via less invasive procedures. Thankfully, he was able to do. It's incredible how much they can do just via a catheter procedure in the cath lab. The tiny insertion through the thigh, and they can do incredible interventions that way now. And that's what we're hoping will be lifelong for him. But additional surgeries are not off the table at this point, just with the way that his heart has recovered. However, looking at him now, you would never know. The things that we are monitoring are much more mild, and have at this rate grown with him a little bit. So he, other than a scar, or several scars, and the memories, you would never know. I mean, he's an active little 2-year-old and is running around, and I feel the need to monitor him more or ask him to slow down and stuff. He's just go, wants to be bouncing off the walls at this point.
Oh, and this is kind of leads me to my next question, which is if you could tell us some of the things he's taught you. I think it's just always so incredible how much we learn from the littlest ones in our lives and how they just change everything. So is there anything in specific that Leighton has taught to you that has made you a different person?
Oh my gosh, the list is endless, honestly. Mm-hmm. And some of this, I wonder if it would have been a similar experience just becoming a mom for the first time, just if motherhood teaches you. But it's always, there's this giant spotlight of CHD and his diagnosis and stuff that I feel like is this lens that we view everything, and my relationship with him and the decisions we make, it's all through this lens. So I couldn't separate the two, but I do wonder about that sometimes. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing is to find balance and to allow these situations and these circumstances that we go through we have to experience them. And I want to be honest with him at all times and, in an age appropriate way, discuss things with him. But I can't sit here and say, you have to be positive and everything's going to be so great at all times and have this outlook that I don't feel inside. So trying to find this balance between how do we live our honest truth and go through some challenges and things that are not going to be that easy to face, while also not letting them consume us. And so in trying to figure out what that looks like for me so that I can pass that on to him and help nurture his own relationship with his health and with the things that will be a little bit different for him growing up. And just kind of carrying that perspective with us has been a huge lesson, because I catch myself sometimes wanting to, it's okay, everything's fine. But I don't feel that way. So finding that balance too, because
it's amazing that you've kind of already started to process that. And I think that's exactly what it is a process. And, I just caution you to not get so mad at yourself when you do say it's okay, because, of course we want to have our words match our child's experience in a loving way. But, you're also telling your child you're safe. You're safe, mom's here. Yeah. And sometimes that comes out like it's okay. And then, you can always follow up after. And when mommy says it's okay, she means that you're safe, mommy is here. So it's just, and it's always a process too. And we're going to say things that aren't the right thing at the right time, just like any other time, especially in parenting. So, it's just learning what works, and, you'll figure out, does he like to know things way in advance? Do we tell him, right before we leave? Is he somebody, you're just going to learn all those things alongside him as he learns it about himself.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things, parenthood holds a mirror up to you, and it made me realize how hard I am on myself. I don't think I was aware of that to this degree, but also motherhood is something that I hold so near and dear to me that I want to do perfectly. And that's just not always an option. None of us are perfect, and we're never going to get it right all the time.
Oh gosh, I know. It's so nice when you finally get to that point. And it's also a process, yes, but okay, maybe I wasn't so kind to myself when I did this or that, and kind of reflecting on that. This is nothing into comparison of, what you've gone through, but when my son was born, I'm terrible at self-deprecation and just speaking so mean to myself. And so, those there's pumping bras. This is so off topic, so bear with me. There's pumping bras so that you don't have to hold the pump up to your breasts, right? So it holds the breast pump for you so you can type on your phone or whatever. I did not allow myself to get a pumping bra because I wasn't working. And I was like, well, this is my job. I can't have any kind of shortcut. And so he would be crying and I'd be holding my pump. It's what was wrong with me? I couldn't even get a pumping bra for myself, but we are mean to ourselves, Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Those pumping bras are a lifesaver, but
right? It's girl, you just had a baby.
Yes, you deserve them.
So tell me, what's helping you cope now? I know you mentioned a little bit about sharing on social media and having your community, and what else helps you kind of maintain? I mean, you're 8.5 months pregnant, and but what's working?
Yes, so definitely sharing on social media, but a part of that is being able to write. It's always been such a good outlet for me. I think I write my thoughts better than I can think them, if that's a possibility. And so that's been huge for me. And it has allowed me to work through anything that we're facing at that time. And also therapy. I started therapy and I found some coaching, and it took a while for me to kind of let myself, similar to your pumping bra situation, give myself permission to seek out outside help and resources. But once I did, it was invaluable to me, and the comfort that it's brought me, and how it's I've been able to heal all these other aspects in my life in talking. I mean, I went in there to discuss the traumatic experiences and everything we went through with Layton's diagnosis and how I was coping, because there were times where I don't think I was coping so well, and I didn't have the most healthy coping strategies. And therapy really helped with that, and I think allowed me to work through and process a lot of things that I don't know that I would have been able to do as well on my own and without that. And I have this huge support system and family and friends who reach out and are so great. But there was something different that therapy was able to avoid, that it was able to fill, and really, really helped me.
Oh gosh, I think that's amazing. And when you find that therapist, that person who is your match, it's much like the cardiologist surgeon that you're like, you're the one. And then you meet the therapist, you're like, you're the one. And, we're just modeling for our kids that taking care of ourselves is taking care of them too. And hopefully they can grow up and continue to do that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like sharing about it too, because there is still a bit of we've come so far, but there still is a bit of a stigma around mental health or seeking help outside of, I don't know, these other coping mechanisms that a lot of people just sort of rely on. And I think it's so important, and it shouldn't be a taboo topic at all. Yet it still feels to share.
I know. Well, or even seen as like a weakness, is just, yes. I'm getting life insurance, and I have anxiety and depression that I'm treated for. And, it's like the life insurance policy. Okay. They're like, all right, we're going to send some out to take your labs. And I'm like, for that, okay, that's fine. It's just, and it's seen as a weakness. I'm like, oh no, I'm great. I'm on medication. I see a therapist. Like, I'm probably way healthier, but yeah, come out and check. But it is just kind of that. Exactly. It's built into society to see it as a weakness, when really we probably all have it to some degree, and we're taking care of it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I have just loved getting to chat with you and getting to know you, and I'm sure everybody who's listening will too. So how can people follow along with you and see Layton and maybe see brand new baby boy when he's born and all of the good things you have coming?
Yes, absolutely. I love hearing from people, and I connect with so many moms in the CHD community via Instagram. Is probably the most active platform that I'm on every day. And it warms my heart every single time a mom reaches out to me. And so yes, I welcome it. But I'm on Instagram at Dimitra White. And my blog is linked to there, and there's tons of resources. I try to share as much as I can. There's been a ton of different organizations that I've been able to partner with throughout this whole process. That have been wonderful, that I am willingly recommend to other parents in a similar situation. So that's where you can find me.
You're so generous with your time and your story and so much. So thank you for being that person for so many moms. I know they're very lucky to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for giving me the platform and for all that you do. And
I'm the lucky one for sure. So thank you. Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.